Yeah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, then, everybody, and welcome to the Northern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sherry Jesperson. I'm chair of this committee, and with me is Councillor Mary Penfold, who's vice chair. We have a number of officers with us today. Hannah Smith, Planning Area Manager, Jenny Roberts, Senior Planning Officer, and Laura Altree, who is our lawyer, and David Northover from Democratic Services looking after our committee. Before I move on, there is a change to the published agenda. Application P FUL 2021 04282, land at Sandways Farm, Bolton, has been removed from today's agenda and it will be heard at a future meeting. So for visitors who've not been to a planning meeting before, and for those watching live, I will briefly outline the procedures for this morning. We have only one application before us today, which we will consider. I will invite the case officer to present her report and recommendations. The report and background papers have been available for members of the committee to read and to discuss with officers prior to the meeting. Next, I will invite those members of the public who've registered to speak to address the committee. When I call your name, if you could come to the table up there and speak, the microphones will pick your voice up as you start to speak. Each speaker has 3 minutes, and in the interest of fairness, I won't allow anybody to overrun. When we've heard from all the members of the public, I will close the public part of the meeting and no further interventions are permitted. Committee members may then ask questions on points of clarification, and when you've done that, we will then proceed to deliberate and come to a view. I must remind visitors, though I don't think you need reminding, that this is a Dorset Council meeting held in public, not a public meeting, so only those members registered to speak may do so, and you may not speak directly to members of the committee or pass any information to the committee members during the meeting. So to move to our agenda then, we have apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Emma Parker and Councillor Brian Heatley and Councillor Matt Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, this would have been Councillor Matt Hall's last meeting on this committee, but he's had to go to the dentist in an emergency. But I think you would want to join me in thanking Matt for the terrific contribution he's made to the workings of this committee. He's gone from strength to strength as he was during his studies in planning, and his contribution has always been well informed, well considered, and well expressed, and he's going to be a great loss to this committee. So if we could minute the fact that we are very grateful for Councillor Hall's contribution. Moving on then to declarations of interest. Any members have a declaration of interest?
Yes, Chairman. I have a declaration of interest in item 7, land and buildings north of Cutler's Close, Sidling St Nicholas, which it is in my register of interest and I own it, and I shall leave the meeting when this is discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No, good. Thank you very much. So could we then move on to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the 12th of July? Are you all in agreement that these are a correct record? I'm seeing nodding. That's very helpful. So thank you very much. I will sign them at the end of the meeting as I usually do. Public participation I have covered already. So now we'll move on to our planning application.
Thank you.
Mary, yeah. Just leave Mary's hand to leave the meeting. Thank you very much for coming all that way for that brief participation. It's very conscientious of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have only one application to consider today, as it's turned out, and that is land and buildings north of Cutler's Close, Sidling St Nicholas. This is to demolish agricultural barns and erect 5 dwellings. This is a recommendation to refuse, which is unusual for our committee, so you need to all be paying attention because the procedures for that are very slightly different. It's before the committee in line with our rules because, as has been explained, the land is owned by a Dorset councillor. I will now ask Jenny Roberts if you'd like to present your report. Jenny.
Yes, this site is in Sidley and St Nicholas on the north-east edge of the settlement. Here, outlined in red, we have dwellings to the west and to the south, and then to the north and the east there are open fields. It's in an area of outstanding natural beauty, but it's also conservation. And there are a number of listed buildings to the west of the site as well. Yes, as we can see, the site is here. Outlined in the dotted lines are the existing barns which are proposed to be demolished. There are 3 of those, and there's 3 detached dwellings proposed on the east of the site, as can be seen here, and a pair of semi-detached properties in the southwestern corner. And here we have an aerial view of the site. As you can see, as I've just mentioned, there are open fields to the north and east of the site, and settlements to the west and south. This plan here shows the conservation area outlined in blue, and all the red stars are listed buildings. And as I said before, the whole of it is within the area of outstanding natural beauty. This is the existing barn to be demolished, so I'll quickly run through what the existing ones look like. The second existing barn and the third. They're fairly modern agricultural buildings, not of any heritage value, but equally they're not considered to cause any harm to the site. They have a neutral effect, it's considered, on the conservation area and the area of outstanding natural beauty, particularly given their height and size. They're what one might expect to see in such an area. There's a proposed barn as part of this application, which is to be in the northern part of the site, and these are the roof plan and floor plans. And this is the elevation slide to show what it would look like. These are the proposed site sections. So these are the pair of semi-detached dwellings, and this is one of the detached dwellings fronting onto Back Lane, and the rear of the site you can see going along here. So the first dwelling, plot 1, is a detached 4-bedroomed dwelling, and this is what the elevations look like. Second dwelling is a detached 3-bedroomed. And then we have a smaller third detached dwelling, which looks like this. The pair of semi-detached properties, this is floor plans for those, and this is the elevational drawing. So, when it catches up, this is looking up Back Lane towards the application site, which is beyond. We can just see a small bit of a white building where that red line is. So it's looking up Back Lane, and then as we get closer towards the development site and closer still. Sorry.
That side.
Yeah. That better? That better?
Try and shower a little bit.
Okay. Project. Right. Barn 1. It was typically the day I went to take the photographs. It was the first very rainy, very foggy day that we'd had since June. But this is the first barn. You can just make out all the countryside in the background. And this is the first barn. As I said, it's a very modest, single-storey barn. Doesn't have much of an impact on the conservation area or AONB. This is showing the first barn that we've just seen and the second barn. And here is barn 2 again, which again is a fairly modest building, which doesn't have much of an impact on its surroundings. And barn 3 is a taller barn, but again, it's what one might expect to see in such a countryside location. And bear in mind, this is on the very sort of edge of the settlement as it goes out towards the countryside. So if we look down Back Lane, here back to where I was originally standing, we have, oh, it's not working, sorry. Computer's just catching up.
It's just buffering. Or not.
In the moment, would it be useful to have the door shut at the back there to stop the noise coming in from?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
There we are. Yeah, thank
See
you.
it now. So yes, looking back down to where I was originally stood, we have the third barn just visible on the right. So although it is a larger barn, it's not particularly noticeable with all the vegetation from this particular vantage point. And again, barn 3, looking down towards to the north of the site is a small road, private road, which accesses the dwellings to the west of the site, and it's not particularly visible from that vantage point. Looking within the site, this is barn 1. Oh,
Sorry, it's backtracked.
taking its time again. I just stick with this one for now. Yeah, so you can just about make out in the background all the countryside. It's just, as I said, it was a very foggy day when I went there. This is barn 3 from within the site, and you can just see barn 2 here. Let me just try and see if I can get this one to catch up again. Oh, right, here we are. So yes, barn 3, again, looking out towards that countryside. You've got Back Lane running behind the barn, and you can just make out the hills here in the foggy area. And the area of outstanding natural beauty. And this shows all 3 barns from within the site. And again, to the back, you can see the countryside, which is all area of outstanding natural beauty. Some more photographs here. This is the southeast corner of the site. We have the southwest corner of the site. So you have dwellings here, and behind these hedges, there are further dwellings. The western edge of the site, which has trees along here, hedgerow along here, and the northwest corner of the site shows still further dwellings. So this is a listed building, and this is a listed building to the southwest and west of the site. And again, a bit more clearly, you can see one of the listed buildings here. That western edge of the site where you've got the little access lane, which is private, looking down towards these dwellings. And then looking at the northern edge of the site, you've got a field here. It's frozen. Okay, slight IT issues.
Right, if you get the.
Right, so the principle of development, these are the key planning matters. The site is outside of any defined development boundary. Sidling St Nicholas doesn't have a defined development boundary and never has. It doesn't have much in the way of services or facilities. There's no shop, no school or anything like that.
Sorry, Jenny, could,
sorry.
Yeah,
Right, is that better?
yes, so.
I'll try talking into it a bit more. Yes, so there's no defined development boundary. There aren't very many facilities. There's certainly no shop or school or anything like that. We now have a 5-year housing land supply, which means that development for open market housing such as this should be restricted to within a defined development boundary where the location is more sustainable. We have designated heritage assets in the form of the conservation area within which it lies and the listed buildings that I pointed out on the slide earlier, which I can go back to in a moment. The Conservation Officer considers that the application proposed, or it constitutes less than substantial harm to these heritage assets because of the very sort of edge of conservation area location of these proposed dwellings, where it gradually goes from the residential dwellings into the countryside, and it's a nice transition with those agricultural buildings, and that can be seen from the rights of way in the area of outstanding natural beauty distant from the site. By the same token, it's considered that the proposal is detrimental to the setting of the area of outstanding natural beauty because at the moment, neutral effect the existing buildings, but the proposed dwellings will add an extra domesticated form to that area, and with their 2-storey height will not have that gradual reduction in heights into that countryside setting. In terms of residential amenity, it isn't considered that that would cause any problems. There are no sort of issues with regard to overlooking or overbearing, so that's not a problem. Access and parking, subject to conditions, the highway officer had no objections to the proposal, so that would be absolutely acceptable, subject to those relevant conditions. The tree officer needed further information before making his decision about this, so we haven't been able to assess the trees situation, the impact on the trees effectively so far. And the final key planning issue is that the site is within the Poole Harbour catchment area, and recently it was found that phosphates are caught within this area, and any dwellings or things with overnight accommodation will have a negative impact potentially on the Poole Harbour, the water quality of the Poole Harbour area, which is an international nature conservation site, and there is no mitigation provided to countenance this. So the recommendation is for refusal of this application. And if I just run over that quickly again, the principle of development, so recommendation for refusal because it's outside of a defined development area in an unsustainable location, has a negative impact on the designated heritage assets, which are the conservation area and the listed buildings, and negative impact on the setting of the area of outstanding natural beauty, and negative impact in the absence of any appropriate mitigation on the Poole Harbour water quality due to phosphates, and we have insufficient information about the trees at the moment. A comment there. So the recommendation is to refuse this application.
Thank you. Thank you. You done? That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. I apologise that it was a little difficult to hear part of that. We seem to have a lot of background noise here, so including me, we will all speak up. We're now going to hear from our members of the public, because there are no other officer presentations to hear today, because there are no particular highway issues for us to consider here. So could I ask Mr. Shears, who's to come and speak first? Thank you. If you'd like to.
Is the microphone on? Press the right-hand button.
Right-hand button, and it should go red.
Great.
Oh, it's still the same, thank you.
Press it hard.
Is it not?
Neil's got theirs on.
I'm very sorry. We do seem to be having trouble with the microphone today.
There it is.
Good. Well done. Thank you very much. Sorry about that, Mr. Shears. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Under the 5 Waterside Lane, listed property to the bottom left-hand corner. Which is 2 meters away from Sidling Water and approximately 1 meter up Sidling Water. I objected on 3 key grounds: adverse impact on a conservation zone in an area of outstanding beauty, significantly increased flood risk and surface water overwhelming the village sewage system. And this, in my view, is an unsustainable development. It's an overdeveloped plot with no affordable housing, and there's inadequate parking for the village and no public transport. I'm going to focus on the first 2 as time is limited. Adverse impact on a conservation zone. It lies outside the defined development boundary of the village. An almost identical application was submitted and refused in April 2021, and the developer did not appeal. The reason for a refusal then was build form, large-scale design being undesirable development for a conservation zone. The whole application says the farmyard is redundant. However, a new barn, 3-bay barn, is being built on the site. So the whole premise of replacing agricultural and chasing to residential makes no sense to anyone apart from the developer. There's an adverse impact on my property number 5 and the listed building directly above number 6, because the last 300 to 400 years we've had uninterrupted views of the escarpment, which was foggy in the pictures shown to the back, and that will then be removed by these large-scale developments on the site. And in June of this year, the senior conservation officers said they were unable to support this particular scheme. Increased flood risk. Sidling suffers from flash floods. The adjoining properties close to the water are in flood zone 3. Twice in the last 10 years, flash floods have resulted in Sidling Water breaking its banks, with the water flowing alongside the walls of my cottage. Any sewage which enters that water goes straight into Poole Harbour, and that is a site of special scientific interest. The last incident occurred on the 31st of October 2021, and Dorset Council produced this excellent report here, citing the causes of the flood. In East Street, which just joins and runs along the bottom of the 8 properties had water entering their house. And in section 4.2.1 of Dorset Council's report, some of the surface water runoff was attributed to land to the north of Cutler's Close, understood to enter Sidling Water via the gardens at 6 Waterside Lane. So in between my cottage and the cottage above, and I saw that it was a river, a torrent coming through. This development, 50% hard surface area of that site, therefore it will increase the flood risk. In the winter of 2019-2020,
you're pretty near the end of your 3 minutes. If you could wrap up, if you could, please.
The wet weather led to the sewage system in the village being overwhelmed, and we had to pump out 5 houses. The application for this says there's no increased flood risk for adjacent properties, which is clearly incorrect. Surface water to go into the main sewage system, which it possibly can do. There is no explanation how to treat foul water sewage. It says unknown. So I objected on those 3 grounds.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Giles Moore, you're the agent, I believe. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Good. Is the microphone still on? No. Could we try again for the microphone to be on? It is. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Whenever you're ready.
Chairman, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the planning application today for Cutler's Close, St Nicholas. From the outset, the applicant has sought to engage and work with the council to try and secure an approval for the redevelopment of the site. In October 2019, a request for pre-application advice was submitted to the council, which received, in relation to design matters, a positive response. Unfortunately, those comments weren't carried through to the formal application which followed the pre-application submission. The first application was refused in April 2021. This revised application seeks to address those concerns which led to the refusal. The revised design proposal seeks to reduce the scale of the proposed dwellings and to create a scheme that closely resembles a loose arrangement of mixed rural dwellings that reference a former courtyard. And you've seen on the plans before you this afternoon the dotted outline of the previous submission. With regard to units 4 and 5, these appear as a barn conversion facing towards the central courtyard area.
Yeah, sorry.
The design approach will provide a more clearly defined residential edge to the village, defined by Back Lane, which serves residential properties and waterside lane. There is little doubt it will represent a considerable visual improvement to the unkept and unsightly steel and asbestos-clad barns that form the village edge at present. The proposal represents a low-density, restrained and sensibly designed 5-dwelling scheme, with the housing designs having been further reduced in scale from the first application, and their design language respects the character of the area. St Nicholas hosts a rich and pleasing variety of period styles and materials, and the proposal has been designed to reflect the local distinctive character. In terms of built forms and with regard to materials such as slate roofs and heating, it intends to form a positive frontage onto Back Lane, which from the housing will be, where the access will be formed. The scheme design takes into account this frontage and the views from the Airbnb, and its design quality will enhance the important characteristics of the area. The boundary trees will be natural, native deciduous hedgerows with post and wire fences to define block boundaries after they become established. Whilst the site is outside of a settlement boundary, it is well connected to the services and facilities of St Nicholas, which includes a church, a pub, children's play area and a village hall. As such, the applicant contends that the site can be considered as being in a sustainable location. Other matters concerning flood risk, you'll see from the report, your officer's report, that the site was in flood zone 1 and Wessex Ward had no objection to the connection to the existing foul network. I would ask with regard to nutrient neutrality that given the government's recent announcement regarding a requirement for water companies to upgrade wastewater treatment works, the committee's members consider a final grounding condition. Should this route not be agreed by members, I would ask the members consider narrowing the reason for refusal to only relate to nutrient neutrality. Overall, I hope you're able to approve the application that's before you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Finally, if we could hear from Mr. Green from the Parish Council. Thank you very much. Can we make sure that the microphone is lovely? Well done.
Seems little change from the planning application refused by the proposal. Reasons for objections to this proposal remain unchanged. I also agree with the opinion of the senior conservation officer that the construction of 2-storey buildings fronting Back Lane, facing the landscape would be an incongruous visual element. As he has said, the character of Back Lane will be broken without firstly the conservation area. Parish Council agreed that the development would be detrimental to the character of the rural edge of the village site, with particular impact on listed properties 5 and 6 Waterside Way. St Nicholas is an unsustainable location with few facilities and services. For example, there is no school, medical services, or a shop. Residents of the site will be dependent on motor cars to access facilities in the town and village. It cannot be justified in terms of the economic, social, or environmental dimensions of the national planning policy. Whilst the proposal may not be required to include provision for affordable or social housing, this does not, unlike the Broadbridge development, provide for any local housing or will not assist in any way young people who are born in the remain living in the area. There is no government in place to prevent the use of this property as a second homes or holiday letting. Sales will not be restricted to those already living in the village. This is a major concern for the residents of St Nicholas. Parish Council notes the comments of the Highways Department in relation to parking provision considers the provision of only 11 parking spaces, including one visitor space, to be wholly inadequate. The 10 allocated spaces include 2 spaces in what are probably unsuitable carports or small garages. Overall, parking provision is insufficient for the anticipated levels of occupancy of these 5 properties, particularly the single 4-bedroom property, should, in the view of the council, have at least 3 allocated spaces. A single visitor space to serve 5 properties is completely unsatisfactory. The scheme is likely to lead to overspill parking in and around the development, along Back Lane, in Cutler's Close, and elsewhere in Sydney. Shortly experienced dangerous and obstructive parking along East Street and High Street. Access to development will be via Back Lane, which is a designated byway to all traffic. It is effectively a single track road. This route is incapable of accommodating passing vehicles, and drivers frequently have to back along the lane to allow for oncoming vehicles. There are likely to be serious obstructions to emergency vehicles, which is obviously a concern. There would be undoubtedly further damage to the verges along the street arising from vehicles reversing along these routes. At the junction of East Street and 3 Acres, there are 3 blind spots which are already dangerous. Large numbers of additional vehicles using this route would add to the problem. Villagers are very concerned that it's only a matter of time before someone is seriously killed or injured at this location. Parish Council note the comments of the case officer in relation to the potential flooding implications of the development, it being in flood zone 1. However, Sydney has a big history of flooding and has recently suffered serious sewage discharge in the winter of 2019-20 and a major flash flood on the 31st of October 2021. Dorset Council's flood investigation report into the 2021 event concluded that land in the North Cutts floods contributed to the flooding in the eastern part of the village when it entered Sidling Water. The possibility of water rising through the springs cannot be discounted at this location. It is unclear how the site will connect to the existing mains drainage and the application of
As your 3 minutes, could I ask you to wrap up? Just conclude. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off, but I have to be fair to everybody. Thank you very much. Before I go to the committee for questions for clarification, Jenny or Hannah, do you have any comments that you want to make on the points that we've heard so far? I'm thinking specifically about the point about flooding that seems to have come up once or twice. You don't have to. I'm just giving you the opportunity.
The site is within flood zone 1, which is somewhere that's considered acceptable for development. And if this application were to be approved, we could put on fairly robust conditions to get the details of a suitable drainage scheme to be approved. So that would be how we would deal with anything there, given that it's not within flood zone 2 or flood zone 3.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Anything else you want to comment on before I go to committee members? Right, I'll go round the room then and ask. This is points for clarification. Councillor Andrews, do you have any points you want to ask at this point? Thank you.
If I click the right button. Just to clarify, Wessex Water made no objection whatsoever to this and no comment and didn't put any words together on what they were.
Checking. But no, they didn't object.
Which I'll find the response on the system.
Yes.
I'll find
No objection, but can we hold that thought and come back to it? Any other questions, Councillor Andrews?
No.
Councillor Ryder, do you have any questions at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. Just some clarification, Jenny. Where is the public right of way? And it's to the east. Where does it lie? And what's the elevation of the land like on that side? Thank you.
public right of way is in this direction. I'm just going to see if I can find it on. Sorry, if you could just bear with us, please.
The consultation response here.
Oh, okay.
To Essex Water. Yeah, going back to the objection subject to the fact that it's
Yeah, so Wessex Water have no objections, subject to surface water being disposed of via the SUDS hierarchy, which is subject to building regulations. And we would, of course, put a condition on requiring those details as well and discuss that with our flood risk management team before we discharge those details.
And they've asked for conditions on foul drainage.
Yeah, they've also asked for conditions relating to foul drainage pipework and how it will be implemented to ensure it results in a sealed system so that it doesn't pollute the surrounding environment. We're just checking for the.
Yeah, thank you. While they're getting, what was behind your question, Councillor Ryder, or did you just want to know where
Just where it is on the map in relation to the proposed site. It's quite important because of the A and B impact to understand where.
Yes, exactly so. We'll, sorry, take your time. I think they're trying to get it up on Dorset Explorer so we can see where the public right of way is. I apologise this is taking the time, but the internet, as we saw, isn't terribly good in this building today. The first time that it's happened to us that we haven't had very good connection, so we won't criticise the Exchange because it's a wonderful venue, but it certainly seems to be struggling a bit today. But luckily, we only have one agenda item, so we will be home by tea time. And it's going to share her screen now, and then we can see the where the map is. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Right, over to you.
The application site can be seen. Yeah, that's the application site, and the purple areas, the purple lines are the rights of way, the public footpaths around the site.
So you could look back towards the site from the open countryside from the footpaths and see this edge of settlement site here. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see the land is quite, it increases in terms of the, you can see here the gradient. So you're walking uphill from here. So you look back towards the village from the footpath. And I think that's part of the A and B concern is that at the moment, even though it does have buildings on it, it's very rural in its appearance. They appear as agricultural buildings. And I think the form and massing and scale of the buildings that are proposed are quite a significant increase in built form on that edge of site. And that's taken away the fact that it's in the countryside, not near a settlement boundary. It's looking at the actual site constraints. It is visible. It is that transition, as Jenny said, to the rural sort of countryside area. It's the whole of the area around the site is in the conservation area, so you've got that sensitivity there and the list of buildings. And it's just, I know there have been some amendments through this revised application to address some of the previous concerns, but the end dwelling, the detached dwelling, is still a very large, bulky, detached house, so it's not subservient to what's around it, which is predominantly two-storey, smaller scale bungalows and traditional dwellings that have lower eaves and are more what you'd expect in that area. And whilst there might be design elements in the scheme that reflect the village, overall, it's not an intrinsic character, I'd say, that reflects the historic form of the settlement as well.
That's helpful, thank you. Any other questions about, you've seen where it is in relation to the, you happy with that? Councillor Cook, we are on questions still?
Yes, reference was made by one of the objectors regarding the highways access.
Yes.
And can you, I suppose actually going back to what you had shared there for a moment, that the back lane is a designated byway rather than public highway, is that, can you clarify that? And did highways make any mention of that in their report?
Highways have confirmed that it is a highway that's maintained by the Highway Authority, so it is a public highway, and they haven't raised any objections on it. It is fairly narrow, but they haven't got any evidence of any specific collisions or any concern there in terms of safety. They've made the comment that it would be a low amount of traffic that would be generated from the scheme at the AM and PM, which is very few movements there. So any existing situation wouldn't be made demonstrably worse by this development, and therefore they haven't objected. And likewise, there's sufficient parking allocated inside the site. So they're not here today, but they did make those representations.
They did indeed, yes, yes. So highways have made no objection, and it is a road maintained, it's a privately owned road?
No, maintained by
Dorset Council, okay,
yeah.
But narrow.
It's sort of made at the
One
moment,
way,
so it's
yeah.
not, it's not the same level you'd expect on a A, B, or C road, but it's still maintained at the public expense and
even the track up to it, because I saw on the satellite image, I think that you showed, that it seems that the metalled road ends before the property or the development site itself. Is there any way that you can actually get that?
I can just get
Satellite.
the
The photographs, that would be helpful.
you can see here that
Yes,
this is D road, so they're not classified, but they're still maintained roads.
yes.
You can see the extent there on the blue.
If we could go back to the presentation, the photographs that you had of, I think that's what Councillor Cook is referring to here.
I feel that little pin marker there is Cutler's Close rather than the actual property
It's
itself.
an address point, it's the site above there, so you're right. So it looks like it ends here, the maintained.
It does.
And then it's unclassified. The rest of it was unclassified.
I thought I heard Jenny say that it was a private road.
Oh, that's the one to the north of the site.
Oh, all right,
Little
yes,
private
sorry, don't
corner.
let me confuse the issue.
Close, I think.
Um,
Sorry, I just kept the photographs so we can see. So yes, we can see it's maintained up to around here,
right,
which is just past the Cutler's Close area. And then you can see as we get to the site,
Right.
it is, yes, that section there isn't. So there is plenty which is maintained by highways, but that only takes us up to
the beginning of
that
this.
bit, yes, to the beginning of it.
Right, okay,
So-
does that answer your question at this point? Yes.
Yes, it does. And also the access for refuse collections and emergency vehicles, should that be.
Presumably, we have tested that there would be access for emergency vehicles and refuse,
Also allowance, Chairman, for those
or have we
things.
not tested that because we were,
By building regulations,
Right,
safety measures, but there's no
Yes.
reason why you couldn't get access. Or there would be, through building regulations, requirements to mitigate, like sprinkler systems or such like.
yes,
But it's not something that you need to concern yourself
no.
about now.
So they have to be conditioned, should we?
should we? Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. That's a helpful question, thank you. Councillor Jones, no question? Thank you. Councillor Pothbury? Councillor Jones? No, you're good. Councillor Fry?
Thank you. We've heard of the report mentioned by Dorset County Council about the flooding in the area. Was that taken into account in your decision-making process?
It wasn't. It was, we use our flooding systems for that, but our mapping systems to show us whether there are any issues.
So that seems to me a little bit at odds, because you're using a system and saying there's no flooding in that area, but at the same time we have a report that evidences that there has been flooding in that area. The two don't seem to contradict each other.
Yeah, we have a mapping system on Dorset Explorer, which is where we get our information from, and it's in flood zone 1, so therefore it doesn't require a flood risk assessment to be made. And were we to approve this application, we would put on those conditions with regard to surface water flooding, which would then be looked at by our flood risk management team when those conditions came in to be looked at.
I think through the planning condition, flooding wouldn't be able to, it would have to be dealt with within the site so that it didn't make flooding any worse elsewhere. So the constraint around the site shows that there is areas of higher risk flooding outside of the application site, but not the site itself. We don't have any evidence of the site itself flooding, it's the surrounding area. So through the planning application, we'd ask for a flood risk assessment if it was in the higher risk area, which it isn't. This site is flood zone 1, as I said, but through conditions, they'd have to come up with, which we don't have at this point, a whole drainage set of details to ensure that it didn't make flooding worse elsewhere. So that it would be controlled through what would need to be pre-commencement conditions before any development happened.
Surely I'm aware that the water comes off the hills there behind, and the potential to develop that site is only going to increase the speed of the water flowing down that valley. I'll come back to that one.
I think you're right. I think where we are essentially is that we've heard about flooding. You might want to discuss it, but I think it's the position is that Jenny has not, that the case officer has not included flooding as within her reasons to refuse. That doesn't mean it's not an issue for you on the committee, but it's not in the reasons for, and you may think that there are already sufficient reasons to refuse without going there or not.
Thank you. And the sewage system, Jenny, can you give us more information on that? I mean, I understand that Wessex Water haven't commented. That seems odd when the system is perhaps at capacity.
They have commented and they've asked for details of that. Yes. Foul water system to come in, so that would be a condition to add.
So that would be another one that should we approve, that would all have to be conditioned to make sure that all of those issues that have been identified locally are mitigated. But yes, but we're not there yet. Yes, okay. So I've got no further questions. Would anyone would like to begin the discussion on this? Councillor Stella Jones, please.
I know Sidling well. I've been there quite often, and I don't think this planning application would help the village at all. It wouldn't enhance the village. It would spoil the conservation area. It is outside the existing development boundary. And quite frankly, the houses are the wrong type of housing anyway. They wouldn't be bought by local people. They're far too large. They're not affordable housing. And I think we have many reasons to refuse this. I'd like to recommend refusal on all the grounds that particularly the fact that we already have enough housing land here. Many years ago, Sidling actually gave forward some land for affordable housing for local people, but this isn't that type of housing at all. Housing in the wrong place, then it would spoil the village.
That's very helpful. So that's a proposal to refuse from the, before I call for a seconder, I'll let the debate run a bit more. I see Councillor Pothecary's got her hand up and Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Most beautiful village, and I'm well deserved the protection afforded to it as a conservation village and sitting within the AONB. To be honest, listening to the comments and the report, I'm not too concerned about the extra vehicle use or the possible unsustainability of the site. However, I am concerned about flooding issues, and I'm not keen on the height of the building shown, which makes the redevelopment more obvious in the conservation area and AONB. Really, my colleague here, I don't think they're villagey looking. They look incongruous. So I think the redevelopment is more obvious in conservation areas and AONB. So I consider the building form and large-scale design of the buildings to still be undesirable.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. The NPPF guidance states that planning authorities must take due regard to conservation areas, listed buildings, AONBs. And I think that is very, very important in this case. I don't see any material change from the last refusal. And should this proposal go forward, it's going to enclose those listed buildings. It's going to change that edge of village character forever. So I don't think I should be supporting it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews, and then Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too agree with my colleague here, but the development is contrary to the S2 of the local development plan. It's outside the local development boundary. It's going to have harm on the ANLB. It's overdevelopment of the plot. It's not a sustainable location, and it's not an exceptional case as for the NPPF. And I'm really concerned about foul waterways these days. I don't see any mitigation into phosphates going into the local water stream. And I think that needs to be something we need to bring up in every single planning now, because we have a problem in parts of the county now where we can't build. So, no, I would totally agree, and I support Councillor Jones in what she said.
Does that mean you're seconding the refusal?
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with all the comments that have been made before. I think, actually, picking up on what Councillor Apothecary said, I think we ought to take a lot more regard to the lack of amenity. I think for me, that's one of the things that you can't just sit 5 houses in an area that really doesn't have the backup and the support that they are going to need. We've got to take thought for the environment these days, and for a 4-bedroom house, which is, it's going to have probably a growing family there. They're going to have to be moving to school, trying to travel to schools, travel to shops. I don't know where the nearest sort of shop settlement is, but we've got to take into account those trips aren't going to be at no cost to our environment. Even if they're by electric cars, that electricity has got to be generated somewhere, and it will be hopefully green, but probably not. So I think with all the comments that have been made, we should add the lack of amenity to support a settlement which is significant in that area.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Now, I'm hearing a wide agreement here. Is there anyone on the committee who wants to say something different or something new? Carol Jones, Councillor Jones.
Not necessarily for this development, but I just really wanted to come back. I think that market forces determine somebody wants to buy a property that's in a rural location with few amenities. I don't think that's a planning consideration. I think the site as it is scruffy. I think something should happen on that site. I'm not saying this is the right development, and perhaps something a little bit less conspicuous would work, because I think at the moment it's just scruffy, and I think something could be done there. And I wonder whether our approach would be completely different if we actually did not have our 5-year housing supply. And I'm not sure whether we have our delivery test on it, but I'll go with the flow. I'm happy to go with the flow, but I actually have some sympathy for the landowner, because I think something there that could be very nice could happen on that side.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Is anybody else want to send? I think, or are we're about ready. We've had a proposer and a seconder that we refuse this on the grounds outlined in the officer's report. I'm not hearing any dissent from that, so I think we're ready to go to the vote. All those then in favour of refusal on the grounds outlined in the officer's report, please raise your hands. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that application then is refused. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Good. That was our only substantive matter today. There are no urgent items and no exempt business. So I'm now able to close the business at 2:55, which is